Thinking of selling your apartment or house in Spain? What will the expenses be? And how much will you have left over after paying all the taxes and fees? Hello, I'm Evgenia, and today's topic is the costs of selling real estate in Spain. In previous videos, we discussed the costs incurred by a real estate buyer, how much it costs to own property in Spain, and looked at several specific examples. If you haven't seen those videos, you can watch them by following the links under today's video. Shall we begin? In the case of a seller, it's very difficult to say the approximate percentage of expenses you'll incur. It's not like the case with a buyer. When buying, we can say, expect to buy an apartment for a certain amount, and your expenses will be 10 to 13%. But in the case of a seller, everything is very individual. There are many factors that affect the costs when selling real estate. How much you bought the property for, how much you're selling it for, how many years you've owned it, and even your age. That also plays a role. Was it your primary residence for permanent living, or did you buy this property just for vacations? All of these factors affect the total amount of expenses when selling real estate. Well, let's start step by step. At the initial stage, you need to determine the price of the housing. Of course, when considering the price, you can look at the prices of similar real estate objects on advertising platforms. This doesn't mean they're sold at that price, but you can use them as a rough guide. Of course, it's better to contact a real estate market specialist, such as real estate agencies, who know exactly what objects in this area, this type of real estate object, are selling for, and will help formulate a more specific price. Of course, every property owner wants to sell it for as much as possible, and in reality, a neighbor's apartment might cost much less, because in our region, many factors affect the price of real estate. It depends on the direction of the main windows of the apartment or house, south or north, depending on the floor. In our region, the higher the floor, the more expensive the apartment. That is, even with the same layout in the same building, the higher the floor, the more it can cost. This is often the case. The view from the window is also very important. Is it a view of an open, beautiful park? Or could it be a view of the wall of the neighboring house? Well, and many other factors, not to mention, of course, the condition of the apartment. Whether a major renovation was done there, or maybe they just touched it up, or nothing has ever changed since the builders. Therefore, we approach the determination of the price of each real estate object individually. What else I'd like to note is that in our region, basically, the prices you see on advertising platforms on the sales market are prices that already include agency services. Mainly, this is paid by the seller as of today. In the next stage, we'll discuss the documents you need to prepare to sell your property. Don't worry. Of course, the real estate agency helps with collecting all these documents. Well, first you need to identify the title deed for your property. This is either the original contract from when you bought the apartment or house, or you can order a registry extract. We call it a nota simple, and it will have all the information about the owners and any restrictions or encumbrances on the property. One of the documents, we call it IBI or SUMA, is the amount of the annual tax on the property. You need to prepare that too. The next document, mandatory for the purchase and sale agreement, is the energy certificate. This document is prepared by an architect, and the approximate cost of producing it is 150 euros. Currently, having this certificate is important, but by 2030, they plan to introduce a minimum energy efficiency level required for selling property. We must check the identification documents of all owners, because often if, for example, the buyers are non-residents and the property was bought more than 10 years ago with one passport, and a foreigner's number was obtained with that passport, and now they've changed to a new passport, there's often a mismatch in the spelling of the last name or first name in translation, leading to discrepancies in the documents. This point is absolutely necessary to check when selling real estate. In some regions, a document like a certificate of occupancy is also required. This document is also prepared by an architect, and it costs approximately 150 euros. And a certificate from the community stating there are no debts must be provided. In principle, all the costs for preparing documents for sale don't amount to a large sum. It's 250 to 300 euros. Previously, we discussed the mandatory minimum set of documents that need to be prepared when selling real estate. But depending on individual cases, additional expenses are also possible. For example, if the apartment was bought with a mortgage and it's not paid off yet, or in some cases, even if it is paid off, but people haven't finished the process, haven't removed the lien in the registry, then the apartment can be sold even with a mortgage. But documents are prepared in advance, the bank is notified, a certificate with the remaining debt is obtained, and the bank is invited to the transaction. In short, we prepare the documents in advance, and at the moment of the sale and purchase transaction, the mortgage is paid off and the property is sold. A separate item, an expense category when removing a mortgage is closing the mortgage, and these costs will be approximately 500 to 1,000 euros. There are also cases where on paper construction is not completed. That is, we've been living in the housing for 20 or 30 years already, but according to the documents, it's still in the construction stage. So to legalize all this, the approximate cost for this will be about 500 to 700 euros. This can also be done at the time of selling the apartment. It will all happen in parallel. We've discussed the expenses related to preparing the documents for the transaction. Of course, such expenses as utilities, electricity, water, and all taxes must also be prepared and paid before the sale takes place. Alternatively, these costs can be deducted from the property price, and your buyer or their lawyers will handle the settlement of this debt. In our region, the costs related to the actual real estate transaction, the sale and purchase of the property, are paid by the buyer. This includes services such as the notary and the registry. And of course, the buyer pays their own taxes when purchasing the real estate. Many sellers, especially from Northern European countries, also use the services of lawyers. Mostly they don't even show up for the deal and the lawyers sign all the documents for them. The cost of such services can vary as a percentage or as a fixed amount. We've discussed the expenses related to the sale. There are also mandatory taxes. The land value appreciation tax, we call it Plusvalía. This tax is the responsibility of the property seller. It can only be calculated individually because many factors affect it, including the purchase and sale prices, how many years you owned the property, and how the land value was reassessed in that region. So it's also calculated individually when reviewing your specific case. There have been cases where it was zero, meaning nothing had to be paid. And in my memory, the highest tax was around 7,000 and some euros for the land value appreciation. And another tax that may arise when selling property is the income tax on the sale of the property. That is the difference between the price you bought it for and the price you sell it for. You can deduct expenses that you have incurred during the purchase and the sale. For example, the taxes paid, maybe the renovation costs and furniture, but only if bought in your name, meaning the seller's names. Then the net income is calculated, which means we take the total income and subtract any allowable expenses or deductions. After that, the income tax is set at 19% of the net amount. We also want to point out that under Spanish law, when non-residents, that is, people who are not tax residents, sell property in Spain, 3% of the property value must be withheld at the time of the sale. If you don't owe the Spanish state anything, no taxes, expenses, or fines, then the state will refund it to you. But attention, this is not refunded automatically. You must submit a formal request within 4 months for the Spanish state to return the withheld money to you. It is necessary to act within this time frame to ensure the funds are returned. To sum up, what can be noted? That the expenses incurred by the seller can be 50 euros or they can be thousands of euros. Everything is very individual and is calculated separately in each specific case. If you have property in Spain on the Costa Blanca and you've decided to sell it, please contact us. We'll be happy to help you. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out. You can contact us by phone, by email, or through social media. This was Evgenia from Adel Property. See you next time. Bye-bye.